Okay, question and answers about rebooting Indymedia. First question, you say that Indymedia died. I'd like to hear a bit about when you think that happened and how much of it is left and ready to jump into the reboot. I can't really answer that because it was in sort of 40 to 80 countries and each has their different story. In the UK, I could give you part stories, but I don't really want to go into the history. I really want to go into the reboot. I think there are bits left, but Indymedia was a radically open project, and I think what's left tends to be the closed parts. So we'll talk to them as we reboot and see. Back in the UK, in London, just had 14 days of lockdown, going a bit stir crazy. I'm supposed to be out walking along the canal now talking to boaters. I'm going to interview a bunch of people about lifeboats. Okay, more questions on Indymedia reboot, specifically on the video. I love talking about the video because it's very condensed reality. Can you talk more about the balance between decentralized independence but also needing to collaborate in order to have a user base? I think technology has gone in a totally, we've had neoliberalism for the last 40 years, which is all about individualism. And I think our technology embodies that. The ideology of neoliberalism, it's in most of our technological projects. More socialistic, anarchistic thinking, more community-based thinking, largely doesn't exist. We try it, but I think our code, we need to try harder. So I'm trying to take this different ideological view and move it back into the open web. So I think human beings are community creatures first and individuals later. Our world's all about individuals, except we watch the same old crap on Netflix and post the same cat photos on Facebook. So we're groups, but only in the worst possible way. I think we need to re-celebrate groups in a more healthy way. While we're waiting for questions, here's one. Moderation has always been a part of even the centralized Indymedia publication process. Yes, it's a collective moderation, an open collective moderation. So you have the newswire, which is live news, which at the day was open publishing, so anyone can just publish directly to it without an account. And then from that newswire story, an open collective would take the links, the photos, the audio recordings, the videos, and they'd do news stories, which they put on the central column. And anyone could propose a news story, and if nobody said no to it within 24 hours, it would appear on the newswire. It was a very idealistic project and practical in its day. I think we have to do it differently now, but there's a part of the reason Indymedia is ripped apart. I want to avoid that battle, that argument. So I'm going to just put switches in the software at each point, so you have it open, close, open, closed, open, closed, moderation, open, close. So the individual users who set up the accounts, set up the instances, can decide how they want to run them, like the original naive Indymedia, like later paranoid Indymedia, or some combination of in between. So I don't want to make those decisions for people. I want to build software which they can flick switches to have their own personal decision, and then people can choose to federate to that instance with the particular switch flickings or not, because it's a web of trust and news flows go through this web of trust, so the act of federation becomes central to news flows. The fourth column for that actually in our case that goes on to just the admin interface. In the original Indymedia there was a view which was blocked content. So you could see the front page, there would be the open newswire, and then if stuff was blocked or removed, that would still be visible, but in a background page, which you have to click to get to. So we just moderated that, changed that a little bit. Collective moderation, that's an interesting point. Trusted news flows. This is a complicated question. This is the metadata subject, which I left out of the video. I'd quite like to come back to that one later. What do you think of the tendency of activists to post on .com platforms because that's where people are and we need to get the message to them? I'm very much for use and abuse. Use open platforms, abuse the .coms. Publish on an open platform, put a link in the .coms. And whenever someone starts commenting, drag them over to the discussion on the open web. Use it use the .coms, stay in the .coms, but get people to hold people's hands as they step away back to the more healthy open web relationships. So use and abuse is my core strategy with .coms and Facebook and Instagram and all that crap. Yeah, what balance of meet people where they are is acceptable? Sharing indymedia in response to someone's fake news social media post. The reboot will be based on trust links. So to be able to publish something on indymedia, you need to get in by a trusted link. Someone needs to federate to the platform that you're publishing on. So if nobody, the moderation is distributed across the different instances, and you've got to get your fake news story onto one of these instances, and then that's got to federate onto other instances to get it onto those instances. So fake news will tend to self-ghettoize and disappear because nobody wants to be letting spam into the system. Can we perhaps prioritize physical local community to share news and communication? Yes, indymedia was all based on offline stuff. For example, I set up a number of indymedias, was involved in, and I set up indymedia centres. We did live TV studios from fields, with thousands of activists invading coal power stations for climate camp, or in Genoa. I turned up there to the indymedia centre, and there was lots of computers running Linux with no software on them. So we had to rip out a couple out of the network and install Windows because we need video editing. And then we then got people coming in with tapes, etc., encoding stuff and uploading it. Indymedia's always been an on-the-ground project. It's had a healthy balance between on-the-ground and online. The organising meetings for indymedia were open public meetings. The discussions were on an email list, public. I have a question about the activity conference related questions that's also about boats. Okay, we don't know answer that one. You need to get in from a trust link, but what about COP infiltration? I think we had a problem with that, a huge problem. During my days in activism, the vans were driven by police spies. The people who had the best technology and did the best things were police spies. They worked really hard. I worked with some of them at the time. They never appeared on my camera, though, interestingly. I look back over hundreds of hours of tapes of these police spies, and you see them go past in the background occasionally, but they avoid the camera. But, they work very hard, police spies, so up to a point, they're healthy. You can't keep them out. Let me read that again. Really deep examples. The original McLibel case, the meeting that they actually based the prosecution on, there was 3/4 corporate and police spies. And these people were working in the campaigns, making the campaigns happening, handing out the leaflets. I joke a little bit, but that's just the nature of activism. If you're doing something that's powerful and changing the world, people are going to try and intervene. It's just what happens. Secure scuttlebutt, famous for a social net designed by the needs of someone who lived on a boat. Yeah, opposed to that internet access. Could you talk more about that and maybe how activity could learn from that? Secure scuttlebutt. I'm using that because one of the founders of not one of the founders, one of the people who works at the core of that code and is doing a sort of a semi.com version of Secure Scuttlebutt. He's got big funding to do it. he was one of the founders of Indymedia as well. So we've been having this conversation. He's talking to the Twitter guys. He was the tech founder of Twitter for many years. Actually, I was employer number 5 at Twitter, which was based on activist code. So Scuttlebutt is an interesting project. I find it pretty unusable, as many people do, but I like the fact that it's offline. You can publish on your phone without being on the internet. As long as somebody in the crowd is on the internet, your stuff should upload. And at most protests or riots, I've been to many, your phones almost certainly stop working. So to have an offline way of publishing stuff so it escapes off your phone before the police grab you and pick up your phone and smash it on the ground is a useful thing to have. So for more spiky end of activism and more security focused of activism, I think it's a nice fit. And I'm talking to some of the programmers there. Yep. How about the ability to comment and collectively fact-check news stories that fake or simply... Yeah, this is actually built into the Indymedia project. Before a feature story is published, they have to have a consensus. The editorial collective has to have a consensus to actually put it forward. So it's fact-checked by the community that writes the story before it's actually published. So yes, the news is fact-checked on Indymedia. The newswire is people's first-hand reporting, but the feature stories are fact-checked. Comments here. So trying to address with bonfire, not just for boats, people doing. I think bonfire is an interesting project. I think many approaches to this are good. Let's hope they all talk to each other. Let's keep the federation going. Okay, more questions or anything I haven't addressed. I think we have in the hackathon afterwards, we have one project which is currently doing a village level, street level Indymedia, which is nice because we want to federate downwards. We want to push the production of news to the grassroots. The whole project's designed to do that. So we're starting with a hyper-local code base. So come along for hackathon and help on with that. Epion, I can never pronounce it. Why do we need to reboot an old project? There's a great nihilism in tech for the new. There's 100 chat clients. There's new social networks by the dozen. Bitcoins, crap. There's just so much new which is utterly pointless. But there are old things which have a lot of power and a lot of experience and a lot of value. So I think a healthy thing to do, as people did with the Fediverse, is to look back at what exists or what has existed and recreate it using modern protocols. People get caught up in discussions, especially in politics, which act as blocks to stop things happening. The advantage of the Indymedia network is all the discussions have already happened, all the agreements were in place, all the processes in place. So we just shortcuts hours and hours of discussions which probably would never come to an end. You can just go with a little updating, gently, with switches, so you can choose what you use from the updating. Okay, more questions. Yeah, I have a lot of sort of technical questions about how this works. What's the difference between a news story and a toot? How does comments work on a news story? How does the act of federation become central to people's experience of the Fediverse? At the moment, just everything federates to everything out of default. This open media network, you would have to choose to federate. And then the lossiness of ActivityPub would allow the content to leak out into the larger Fediverse. Or flood out if people want it. What's the status of development? If you go to unite.openworlds.info, you'll find a Gitia, which is largely... this is a social technological project, so it's largely dealing with the social technology. The coding is happening, but it's happening slowly. On that Git here, we run lots of existing federated tools like a PeerTube, which is currently down, and a couple of Mastodons, and what else can we run? A couple of Mastodons, PeerTube, SearchX, which I like. So we're trying to sort of seed out, as you saw from the diagram, to publish the Open Media. You can publish from the Open Fediverse from all the applications, and you can have applications in the Fediverse to publish to the news network. So we're seeding out by installing those. So that's in play. The coding starting. Currently, we're looking at code bases. We've got our hyperlocal one, and we need one which scales, because you've got indymedias for streets, for villages. You've got city indymedias. In the UK, I think there were 7 city indymedias. In America, you've got state indymedias. I think there was maybe 20 or 30 state indymedias. You're talking about hundreds of sites around the world all talking to each other. So, at some point, you have to get beyond the local. So we need something database driven, something which will scale for the top sites, for the UK Indymedia or possibly for the London Indymedia, something scale. But as you say, we want to push this downwards. It's better to have a local community because it works at a human scale, just as the Fediverse does. I'm seeing parallels to the last talk. How should instances federate? Opt-in or default connect? The act of federating actually describes what the Open Media Network's about. It's about creating a web of trust. And content flows through that web of trust. So content's got to find a way into it, and then it's got to find a way to thread through it. And human beings choose by choosing who they federate to within the Open Media Network, which we're rebooting the Open Media Network, which we're rebooting the Indymedia Network on, has got to thread through that trust. So the act of federating is key to the Open Media Network, where in the existing Fediverse, everything just connects to everything, apart from it's blocked. Do you think federation topics or actors would help more than hashtags? We plan to do both. With everything with our project, we want to do both with switches. But we plan, we've thought out loud. We haven't really thought it through completely, but we thought out loud that the hashes would be how the flows, Boolean logic on hashes would how the flows flow around this trust network, and then each instance could actually use categories to add to that flow. So, for example, if something appears in my instance which has cats or kittens or something in it, we can automatically have a rule which says, okay, that's a category of cats, so it's kittens and cats is the same as cat, so it adds the tag cat. So as the content flows around, we can add to the flow of folksonomy with categories. So each instance can enrich the flow automatically. And then people can subscribe to these instant rules, these categorization rules in different instances. So, okay, I like that instance, I'm going to take their category rules. So then as content came in your instance, the category rules would automatically apply and metadata would be added to the flows of folksonomies. So the folksonomy would be mostly human, but some of it would be rules-based, categories-based. And it's all just mixed up together and flows through the system. Okay. What's your favorite feature from past media tech that you think has been forgotten, lost in the modern tech world? RSS. I'm a huge fan of RSS. It's a great technology, and actually for the Open Media Network, probably about 40% of the content will come through legacy RSS. We will take, because there's lots of great radical media projects out there, and we'll just bring in their content via RSS feeds, categorize it, tag it, push it out to the trust network, and from this trust network it will bleed out enriched with metadata into the Fediverse. RSS, I love it. Yeah, it sounds like a federated categories would be good, as that actually triggers federation, whereas hashtags are passive. Yeah, I want to subscribe to this category, which is actually just a hashtag, because it's enriched hashtag view, but you would get then all the content, where if you just went for kitten, you would only get kittens rather than everything about cats. Yes, so I think it's a solution, and the idea of having these rules federated around, I trust this group to define my rules. You could trust two groups. I like this group's definition of rules, of categories, and I like this group's, and bring them together and then merge them. So you could have dangerous anarchists on this side and fluffy librarians on this side, and your thing could enrich using both sets of rules and then pass on the metadata tags through your flow. Yeah, it's an interesting question. Given that individuals offer a target of I haven't actually thought about that. I think, yes, they could knock individual instances offline. It would be relatively simple because a lot of them would be self-hosted. So, but then the content probably would have flowed into other instances, and so it'd be like playing whack-a-mole. You would knock one down, then you just get the content from somewhere else. Because remember, the content flows round enriched and is deduped on the way. So if content is blocked from one flow, you'll still likely get it lossy through another flow. So it's kind of resistant to attack. What actually it is, it's a distributed database. There's a talk on this later, which I really want to watch. And actually, maybe that might be a good idea. It's using ActivityPub to build a distributed, redundant database of enriched metadata media objects. That's kind of what the project is, and we're using ActivityPub as one of the hoses. There's another standard called OData, I think, Open Data, which actually looks very similar to ActivityPub, but it's industrial scale set up, and then we've got RSS as well. So we're pretty agnostic. We just want the flows to flow. We want the content to go round, and we want to build this trust web. So yeah, I think I've not given it huge thought, but we're resistant to DDoSes because you whack one part, you'll just get the content from another. It's like the internet, basically. If you want to be, romantic about it, we're setting up a bottom-up semantic web of media objects. We're using the Open Media Network idea to reboot the Indymedia network, but we have a project called the Resistance Exhibition, which is a history of radical movements from, I think, the 1990s to today, which has been an exhibition that's been traveling around the UK collecting up original stories and original objects and digital objects and chucking them into archives. So we'd like to use the same Open Media Network to create flows of this content, metadata enriched flows of this content. So for example, you could be sitting at home and you can say, okay, I'm interested in peace. And you'll just get this flow of historical content, and you can then, I'm going to add this tag, I'm going to add this tag, I'm going to add this tag. And by adding tags, you actually shift the flow somewhere else. You shift it around, and everything then ends up metadata enriched, sitting in multiple redundant databases, which saves our knowledge for the future. At the moment, everything just bloody vanishes, apart from archive.org. We've lost so much, and our history is so badly told that we need to keep our original sources. So that's a parallel project. It's the Resistance Archive, I think it will probably be called, but using the same idea of these flows, enriching metadata of flows. We'll probably store all the content on archive.org, bring it out via RSS or the API, and then put it into the system, flow it around. The original data the media objects will stay on archive.org. We'll just flow the title and the metadata around, and people can add stories to it and enrich the metadata, and then hopefully we can feed that back into archive.org. Okay, couple more questions. Unfortunately, the authoritative point for subscription distributed is always a single actor that can be taken down. Yeah, by flowing the information about and storing it redundant in many different places, we hope to get around that. Yes, the media objects will still be sitting on the original server, which is a problem. There's ideas for that. We can have nodes which just redundantly store media objects. It's not an insolvable problem. With this web of trust, how are new trusted nodes added to this core publishers? Is there some kind of consensus being added to a new IMC? Yes, there's a process. IMC has new IMC process. You would go through this process. You would propose to a group. The whole thing is for open, so you post. In the old days, it would be an email list, say, this is my IMC, this, I've answered all these questions, do you agree? And people would comment, talk, ask questions, and in the end, if nobody disagreed, it would become a new IMC. They'd say, okay, we're going to have a consensus, 24 hours, if nobody says anything against this, it's going to become a new IMC. It becomes a new IMC. So yes. Okay, I think that might be the end. Thanks for your time. We need to reboot Radical Media because at the moment it's all shit. Yeah. There's lots of great content out there, but it's all enclosed in the silos. So let's bring it out onto the open web. And I think ActivityPub is the right tool to do that.
Thank you very much for your talk and your participation in the conference. And I am ending the recording now.